Hi, moin, hello, yes, it's me. Room for Colors is back. And before we do anything else, I owe you a brief explanation. I disappeared, I know, and the reason, if you want to call it that, it was that I tried something. I tried German. I thought, you know what, let me do this podcast in my mother tongue. Let me see if that works. Let me be brave and whatever. Spoiler. It didn't work, not because my German is bad, my German is fine, thank you, but because my art is in English, my art history education was in English, the way I think about a painting, a building, a sculpture, it happens in English. Trying to do it in German felt like painting with the wrong hand, technically possible, deeply uncomfortable, and the result showed. It never felt properly. It never felt like wearing the right shoes. So I'm back in English, where I belong, and I'm not going anywhere this time. I will stay in English. I made the decision, and here we go. So now to everyone who does not know me here. I'm Tina. I'm art historian, creativity educator, and I'm the host, and I am the founder of Room for Colors. And today we are diving straight back in with something I genuinely love talking about. I love talking about buildings. Specifically, what buildings say about power and who built them, who they were aimed at, and what message was baked into every single stone. It maybe sounds boring, but buildings are never just buildings. They are statements. They are claims. They are the stone and mortar vision of someone painting a flag and saying, I'm in charge here, this is mine, don't forget it. And you can see this in private buildings. You can see it in the little house next door. A house always says something about the person living in there. And today we are going from Hanoi to Córdoba to Mexico City, and then we are going to sit with a question or two about what's happening right now in our own time. So let's go and race around the world. We will start in Hanoi because I live in Hanoi, Vietnam. And right around the corner from where I live is the St. Joseph Cathedral. Neo-Gothic, built in 1886, looks like it fell off a postcard from Paris. And every time I walk past it, I think that building has something to say. And a lot of people assume Vietnam is simply Buddhist. And because there's communism, the logic goes there is probably not much religion left at all, which is a nice idea, but it's more complicated than that. Vietnam is more like a religious house share. Buddhism as the main tenet, a very strong ancestor cult, a bit of Taoism, and roughly 7 million people, Christianity. Everything coexisting, sometimes noisily, sometimes not. And I should say up front, I'm not a religious scholar. I'm a curious art historian who spends too much time in temple, churches, and pagodas, asking too many questions. So take this in as the spirit. Because I will not talk about the religion behind everything. When we talk about religion and power, the big words come out immediately. Reconquista, Crusades, Inquisition. All terms with a lot of historical explosive material, but today we are keeping it simple and just looking at the buildings. Because buildings reveal quite a lot about who conquered them and whom and when. And what happened to those places afterwards. Whenever one group of people subjugate another, they were basically two strategies. Soft power and hard power. Soft power is everything that doesn't openly hurt. Religious presence, small symbolic gestures, invitations to participate. Hard power is the opposite. Suppression, violence, and at least the very clear threat of it. Religious architecture was used for both. The St. Joseph Cathedral in Hanoi stands today on a site that used to be a market. Before the market, a pagoda, old, already quite run down. And the French colonial authorities made a deliberate decision. right here is where we build our church. That's the soft way, in stone. A quiet, we are here now, and so is our religion. Whether there were major protests at that time, we don't know for certain. The sources are thin, but the French wanted to present themselves as a civilized, friendly colonial power, which of course doesn't change the fact that they were still a colonial power, with all the unpleasant things that come with it. The building itself is beautiful, by the way. It sits in the middle of Hanoi's old quarter, looking like it fell there from another continent, which, in a sense, it did. But Hanoi is really just a warm-up, because my absolute favorite story about buildings and power is Córdoba. Córdoba is one of those cities where Jews, Muslims, and Christians took turn being in control for centuries, and the central building, the famous Mezquita, was constantly added to, changed, and built over. Every new power put its own stamp on top. It's like an architectural history book where every chapter tells a different story about who was in charge. Let me walk you through the layers, because this building is essentially a layer cake of conquest. The Romans were the first, a temple on the side. Then the Visigoths, Christianity arrives, the temple becomes a church. Then in 711, the Moors. Al-Rahman, the first, initially shares the site with the Christians, but in 784 he buys out their half and begins building the Great Mosque, La Mezquita. What they build over the following 2 centuries is extraordinary. A forest of columns, over 800 of them, topped with distinctive red and white striped arcs. The effect when you walk in is genuinely disorienting. In the best possible way, like the building is leading you somewhere without telling you where. Like geometry has become something almost spiritual. At its height, Córdoba was one of the most impressive cities in the world. Libraries, universities, running water, street light. When much of Europe was still living in what we politely call the early medieval period, Córdoba was a center of learning and culture. The mosque was its beating heart. When 1492, yes, the exact same year Columbus set sail, the Reconquista ends. Ferdinand and Isabella take power, and a few decades later their grandson comes to the throne. Karl V, Charles I of Spain, Holy Roman Emperor, Spanish, German, Austrian, Flemish, a man with so many titles he could barely fit them on a business card. His empire was so large that he could theoretically have a say in everything, but couldn't physically be everywhere at once. The local church authorities in Córdoba had already decided a Catholic cathedral should be built inside the old mosque. This wasn't Karl's personal idea. The people on the ground made the call. Karl approved from far away, without ever having seen the Mezquita. And then comes the scene. The scene is so iconic, it gets told even when historians aren't entirely sure it happened word for word, but it fits so well that even if the exact words weren't spoken, the truth of the moment feels real. Karl travels to Córdoba. The workers have already broken through walls. The cathedral is being pushed into the mosque structure. Karl sees it, and he is appalled. He reportedly says, "You have destroyed something unique to build something that can be found anywhere." The man who approved the whole thing, standing in front of the result, understanding too late what had been lost. He didn't order it to undone. That would have been impossible, but the demolition stopped, and instead, by accident almost, the cathedral was built into the mosque, not replacing it, inside. The result is one of the most fascinating buildings in the world. You walk through the forest of columns and arcs, and then suddenly there it is, A full Renaissance cathedral sitting right in the middle of it all. Some people find it breathtaking, some find it deeply uncomfortable, a wound in the middle of something beautiful. It's probably both at once. But here's what I keep coming back to. The Mezquita survived. Despite everything, despite 5 layers of different rulers, the building is still there, still doing something to people when they walk in, still refusing to be fully owned by anyone. The conquerors thought they were overwriting the building. The building outlasted them all. Did Karl learn anything from that moment? Let's just say history is not a learning diary. Because under Karl V rule, the Spanish, led by Herman Cortés, took over the Aztec Empire. Moctezuma II was captured, later died under circumstances that history has still not entirely figured out, and the old capital of Tenochtitlan was torn down. And what did the Spanish do? Exactly what people in power had been doing for centuries. They built their most important religious symbol right where the most important religious symbol of the Aztecs had stood. On the ruins of the Templo Mayor, the sacred heart of the Aztec world, they built the Cathedral of Mexico City. Construction started in 1573. It took over 200 years to finish, and it was built, at least in part, with stones taken directly from the demolished temple. Think about what that says. You come to pray. You stand in a building made from the stones of a completely different faith, a completely different way of understanding the world. The ground under your feet is a message. That world is over. This one has replaced it. Historians sometimes call it the conquest after the conquest. The military defeat comes first, then the cultural one, slower, quieter, built in stone. There's a detail I love. The Templo Mayor was rediscovered in 1978, right next to the cathedral under the streets of Mexico City. Workers digging for cable hit ancient stone. Archaeologists arrived. The buried thing came back. You can visit it now, the old and the new side by side. The story isn't as finished as anyone thought. And now, before we get to the present, a quick detour, because so far this sounds like taking over always means tearing down, and that's not quite true. The Ottoman Empire in European history books, this usually means battles, armies, and dramatic sieges, but the Ottomans also ran a huge multi-faith empire in a way that was quite different from Spain, Portugal, Britain, or France. While European powers often used religion as a tool of control, sending missionaries, building churches, banning other faiths, the Ottomans worked for a long time with what was called the Millet system. Different religious groups, Muslims, Christians of various kinds, Jews, lived alongside each other. Each group had its own religious leader, its own rules, often in its own schools. As long as taxes were paid and no one openly caused trouble, minorities could keep their buildings, their traditions, their communities. The Hagia Sophia in Istanbul, after the conquest of Constantinople, was turned into a mosque. But it wasn't knocked down. It was kept, looked after, even repaired. Other churches stayed churches. Synagogues stayed synagogues. The Ottoman approach was more often to build next to than to build over. Historians called this practical thinking rather than ideology, not tolerance out of warmth, more like an empire is big. With this many different peoples, simply couldn't force anyone to be the same, so it found another way. Both approaches, wiping out and absorbing, are about power. One just leaves more standing. And now, which brings me to the part of this episode I've been thinking about most. Everything we talked about so far is history. Safely in the past, we can look at it, think about it, shake our heads a little and move on. But what happens when you start to see the same pattern in the present? I just leave one question here, and you can do what you want to do with it. If the city of Mariupol in the Ukraine is rebuilt by the same power that destroyed it, whose city is it now? And then there's something else. The White House, one of the most loaded buildings in the world. A place where every room, every portrait in the wall, every piece of furniture sends a message. Leaders have always known this. The building speaks before anyone opens their mouth. It was recently reported that Donald Trump had parts of the White House changed, historic rooms altered or removed, to build a ballroom, gold grandeur, a very clear idea of what power should look like. And I'm not here to tell you what I think about that. I'm an art historian, not a political commentator. But as an art historian, I'm genuinely curious. Is that new? Or does it remind you of something we've already seen? Rulers who felt the space they inherited wasn't quite grand enough, wasn't quite theirs enough, and so they changed it? Versailles was built because Louis XIV didn't feel the existing palace matched his idea of himself. The Vatican was redesigned during the Renaissance to show exactly how much authority the church had. The winter palaces of the Tsars in Russia were never just places to live. Maybe the language of power hasn't changed at all. Maybe it never does. Maybe we just keep redecorating. I don't want to wrap this up too neatly because I don't think it's neat. What I hope you to take away from today is just this. When you walk past a building, any building, it's worth asking who built it and why there and what was there before. Because the answers are almost never boring, and they almost always tell you something about power that nobody put in a press release. The Mezquita outlasted everyone who tried to claim it. The Templo Mayor came back from under the streets. History is full of buried things that return. And maybe that's the most interesting question of all. What are we building on top of right now? Without quite realizing it. Think about it. And if you want to keep thinking about it together, you know where to find me. Thank you for listening, for thinking along, for coming back, for finding this for the first time. Now go outside and look at a building with different eyes, or sit down and make your own small piece of art. Either way, the main thing is that it's fun. See you next time, and always color on and